Hello everyone, Dr. R here, covering a epi question. First thing you can do is pause, hit the pause button and try to answer the question and then write why which one is correct and why each one is not correct. So let's take a look at the lead-in. Which variable is considered a confounding variable in this study? So we're definitely going to have to come up here and understand what the question stem is because we need to understand the study. So obviously these look like they're going to be different variables that are discussed in the study. So let's go back up here to the question stem. The study was conducted to investigate the association between caffeine consumption and the risk of heart disease. So we have caffeine and heart disease, right? And so this is the hopeful association that we get. And interestingly enough, this question was a actual published research study. So this is modeled after a published research study that ended up having some issues with confounding. There was a subgroup analysis that was done, and I think that's probably the correct answer for this one. So they're looking at caffeine and heart disease, and we're hoping that this causes that. So we're hoping that caffeine causes heart disease. That's what we're trying to figure out here. All right. So caffeine consumption and the risk of heart disease in a group of adults that are 20 to 30 years old. So I think 20 to 30 years old probably is going to be important somewhere. Researchers collected data on the following variables. Age, well that might be where the 20 to 30 years old comes in. Gender, smoking status, that's probably going to be important. Caffeine consumption, so how much caffeine did they drink? And the incidence of heart disease. So these are all the variables that they collected. So which variable is considered a confounding variable in this study? So is age, if I put age up here, is the true relationship caffeine to age to heart disease? Well, absolutely, this could be an issue. This could be a confounder because instead of caffeine use and heart disease, it actually could be age and heart disease. So the older we get, the more likely we are to get heart disease. It might not necessarily be related to caffeine. So the confounder here could definitely be age and heart disease. But we are talking about 20 to 30-year-olds. So the likelihood of having heart disease in 20 to 30-year-olds makes age less likely in my mind. I don't think this is completely incorrect. So I'm just going to put that there. And I'm going to say that this depends on what's down here. This is maybe not the most correct because we have this 20 to 30 years old. So caffeine consumption. Can caffeine consumption be a confounding variable? Well, no, it can't be because we're trying to look at the causation. We're trying to look at caffeine and heart disease. So it cannot be a confounding variable on itself in this situation. Also, do we know about caffeine having an association with heart disease? I think the research right now is inconclusive. There are some studies that show mixed results, some studies that show positive and negative associations, and so I think that there is a big question here on whether caffeine actually does cause heart disease. So, but in this situation, for this question, caffeine cannot be used, so that is out. Gender. So does gender have an association with heart disease? Well, actually, I think it does have an association with heart disease. But I think the issue here is, again, we're talking about 20 to 30-year-olds. So I think it's less likely that gender has an association with heart disease in this group. And we also can know that most likely gender might not have an association with caffeine use. So the amount of caffeine being used in males and females, I am not sure if there's an association with increased use in males versus females. So I don't believe that this variable gender makes sense in this situation, given that we have an age range and given that it's not necessarily related to caffeine use. So that one's less likely. The incidence of heart disease. Well, because heart disease is in our causal pathway here, it's just like when we tried to use caffeine, we cannot use heart disease. So therefore that one's ruled out. That cannot be a confounding variable if it's actually in our pathway. Smoking status. So smoking status. Can smoking increase heart disease even in 20 to 30-year-olds? I believe that can be the actual pathway. So in my mind, smoking is probably much greater than even age in 20 to 30-year-olds. Now, if there was no 20 to 30-year-olds here, age probably would be a greater number, or if it was 50 to 60 or 60 plus, then age probably would trump smoking status. But I'm going to say smoking status is going to be a confounding variable because the pathway here is smoking status causing heart disease. And the interesting thing is that the published research showed that there was an increase in caffeine use and an increase in heart disease. But then when they stratified by smoking versus non-smoking, so they had their caffeine folks and they put them in smokers versus non-smokers, what ended up happening was the association between caffeine and heart disease went away, and they found that the increased heart disease was in the smoking group and not in the non-smoking group. So smoking status is actually the most correct answer choice in this situation. And that is what was found in a previous study. And so the study was actually removed from the academic literature because of the subgroup analysis. This is called the subgroup analysis.